I'm about to be very negative in this video, so a quick preface before we begin. First off, this is not a House of the Dragon is bad cause woke video. I love black people, I love women. Second, make no mistake, I think this show is doo-doo, straight ass, supreme cheeks. But like, hey, if you disagree, that's fine. And despite the title of the video, I really hope Season 3 is great. I just sincerely doubt it will be. House of the Dragon is an adaptation of George R. R. Martin's Fire and Blood. It details an event known as the Dance of Dragons, a massive civil war between the ruling families of Westeros that engulfs the entire country in war and fire. I remember folks being careful when Season 1 came out. Game of Thrones Season 8 traumatized fans around the world with straight haunting niggas like Sephiroth or something. But I gave it a shot and
finally, some good fucking food.
I liked it, but I noticed some things.
The smelly smell that smells smelly.
Something was rotting, fermenting under the surface, and only now, a year after Season 2, do I think I fully understand why my senses were going off like that. So anyway, here's my list of complaints. Considering the show's own marketing and the very premise of a civil war, you might have expected some level of moral ambiguity in the story. Although George definitely took a side with the dance, Fire and Blood is a complex narrative in which both sides commit atrocities, and the ultimate lesson is that war itself is the ultimate evil. Y'all know the deal. That is not the story being told in House of the Dragon. The Greens are the bad guys, plain and simple. If you don't know the original story, it's told a bit like a history book, offering all these different takes on what the true events might have been. The Greens did all the bad stuff, and the Blacks are just trying to let a girl boss do her thing. The showrunners take what was such an interesting storytelling device in the source material, and instead use it like a 24/7 PR campaign for Team Black. Rhaenyra's children being bastards. Her husband knew and didn't even care. Blood and cheese. Team Black accidentally committed child murder. Rhaenyra lying in court that her children weren't bastards, playing the daddy's little princess card, having her dragon fucking eat Vaemond, and then having half of the remaining Velaryons' tongues cut out for repeating the rumors.
You are fake news.
I ain't kidding, by the way. That's actually what happens in the book, and the show just sort of erases this moment because it happens to make Rhaenyra look bad. That's why I don't want any, actually, the original Fire and Blood just depicts a bunch of pro-green maester propaganda. I guess the Maesters just were really in their bag with that one, because if House of the Dragon is the true events of the dance, then can I ask what schizophrenic Maester decided to insert his dark-skinned female OC into the history books? I'll get to Nettles and her erasure later, but if you are still claiming that House of the Dragon is the true events of the dance at this point, I'm just assuming you're a nitrous oxide addict.
Stop it. Get some help.
In which case, who's your plug? The result is that the whole story comes off more like pro-black propaganda. There are so many examples throughout the show, but the scene that personally made me consider trying out a Mortal Kombat Harakiri was the blockade storyline. As a refresher, Corlys Velaryon, who is Team Black, set up a naval blockade in the Gullet, effectively preventing the capital, aka the Greens, from getting food and whatnot. In other words, Rhaenyra is starving the people of King's Landing, and look, I respect the strategy. But obviously, a pretty cruel thing to condemn a ton of innocent civilians to. Rhaenyra then one-ups this plan by sending shipments of food flying her banner, telling the common folk, hey, don't worry, I have your back, and even inciting them to riot against the Greens. But do you see the issue here? Rhaenyra was the one who set up the blockade in the first place. She is the reason why people are starving to death. She's fixing a problem that she created, but then the peasants just kind of go with it? Like, I feel like this show wants me to feel like the stupid one for thinking that the peasants wouldn't just forget who is sieging them upon getting food. Actually, the writers point out that what Rhaenyra is doing is messed up. It's just in the subtext of the scene. Okay, even if we want to go with that, and I'm not convinced, but even if, how come every time the Blacks are portrayed poorly, it's in subtext? But then, when the Greens do something dubious, it's projected out of a fucking concert speaker. We get an entire scene dedicated towards telling us Aegon is a rapist. And then we get a follow-up scene a few episodes later that tell us his abandoned rape babies are enslaved in fighting pits. Like, do you see what I mean? The writers don't want it to be a difficult choice. You are supposed to be Team Black, end of discussion. And like I said, I could have picked a dozen different scenes that all showcase what I'm talking about, but I chose the blockade scene because you have to do so many mental gymnastics to make the blockader the good guy in just about any situation, but somehow the writers still do it. What's worse than a story being contrived is having it be contrived and bad. And what's worse than having it be contrived and bad is contrived and boring. House of the Dragon Season 2 is my personal choice of sleeping medication. I want to tell you a quick story. So my girlfriend at the time was really into Game of Thrones, and so I decided that, hey, why not watch House of the Dragon together? And we finished Season 1 and both really enjoyed it. I mean, there was some weird stuff, like when Rhaenys killed a whole bunch of innocent peasants in order to oar a farm on the royal family. That felt a little strange. But whatever, surely that's an outlier. And so a few months later, we get started on Season 2 and something was off. We kept wondering why nothing was happening. Last season promised war, the trailers promised war. I thought last season was the setup, but really this season we're not even setting stuff up, it's just nothing's happening. Everyone is in council rooms talking about how much they don't want to fight each other. What's going on? And then, in the middle of a random episode, she just turns to me and says, pause it. Well, what's up? You want to watch Code Geass instead? One of the biggest changes the showrunners made was making everyone in the dance extremely non-aggressive. Despite the first season ending with the murder of one of Rhaenyra's sons and this season kicking off with the murder of Alicent's grandson, it kind of feels like no one cares that much. Alicent and Rhaenyra are still besties, and I will get to that scene, trust me. And look, I like the change of making Alicent and Rhaenyra childhood friends. It added a lot to Season 1, and I do think there's a world in which all the betrayals, all the death and suffering is only made more tragic by the fact that all the flames were sparked by two people who once called each other sisters. But that's not really the effect the story has. Instead, Rhaenyra feels incredibly inconsistent. Is she an avenging girl boss who wants fire and blood, or is she the wise leader and the only pacifist in the room? It can't be both, show. Even changes like having Daemon's wife die because she fell off of a horse, or Criston Cole somehow Final Destination accidentally commit the first murder of the war. Like, seriously, what is this? The writers seem to really love the idea of the entire dance being the result of a collection of accidents and mishaps. And we'll get to that scene soon as well, but I feel the need to point out that the issue isn't just that these are changes to the source material, it's that they're changes which cheapen the characters. Drama, action, plot, these things are the result of conflict. And without conflict, you end up with what's damn near anime filler in my HBO show. Look at Laenor, for example.
Shout out to all my gay niggas.
I understand why they changed his death, didn't want to bury the gays, I get it. But in changing his death, they created a plot hole with Sea Smoke that had to be explained away with him dying off screen anyways. Killed an innocent servant for nothing. But who cares about the peasants anyway? Oh, wait. Do you see what I mean? I feel like I'm constantly being gaslighted into thinking this show is good. Before this next section, I think I need to explain what originally made the green versus black debate interesting in the first place, at least to me. Rhaenyra is the rightful heir to the throne, but the people of Westeros don't want her. Normally we'd be excited to see how she's going to prove all the men wrong and become the best ruler in Westerosi history, but, well, in the original story, Rhaenyra isn't really a good ruler. She makes blunder after blunder leading up to the Green Uprising, says and does some very authoritarian shit, pisses off most of her counselors leading them to betray her, and eventually just locks herself in her chamber so she can ignore the rest of the war. I'm not going to go too into it because this isn't the spoiler section, but just trust me, in the source material, she's pretty far from perfect. But therein lies the beauty of her character. Perfect isn't something that she should have to be, but Alicent doesn't see it that way. Alicent believes it is a noble, and especially a noble woman's duty, to suffer for the sake of the kingdom. She has done everything the proper way and believes in maintaining the status quo. Alicent is duty, honor, traditional values, whereas Rhaenyra represents freedom. That said, Alicent is definitely power hungry, and Rhaenyra is definitely a spoiled daddy's girl. In the book, it's not clear whether or not Aegon was a drunken lecher or if he was a proud warrior king, but it kind of doesn't matter because either way, you can see how the throne really shouldn't sit with either of these two parties. They're both kinda cray-cray. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the true green versus black dynamic, but it's what needed to be said so I can explain how they fucked up Alicent's character in her very first scene of season 2.
I have a question for God.
Why, bro? Why? Believe it or not, I am actually a Team Black person when it comes to the books, but Alicent was my favorite character, especially in the show, and this just... why, bro? If it's not obvious, by having Alicent bang Criston Cole, she is exposed as a hypocrite and a fraud. No longer is she a champion for the moral systems that she believes in, and, well, you know, kind of started the war about. But no, I guess she's actually just a power-hungry schemer who didn't even want it a few episodes down the line.
I don't want it.
I can't forget about Criston the Incel Cole. I loved Criston's arc in season 1 because I thought he was a critique of how Rhaenyra's privilege leads her to not understand that other people do in fact have consequences for breaking the rules of Westerosi society. Having a terrified and shamed Criston Cole plead with young Rhaenyra to run off with him and in doing so spare a bit of his honor was a brilliant scene, peak. And her responding by essentially telling him it wasn't a big deal. That's crazy work, but no. This scene tells us Criston Cole didn't care about his honor, I guess. He's just an angry incel mad he got dumped. At least this is Cole's worst scene of the season. This is like top 3 for Alicent. I actually liked the Aegon's prophecy plot point when it was first brought up. I even liked the idea that Alicent misunderstood Viserys' last words and took them to mean he changed his succession at the very last second. Like I said before, Alicent believes she's fighting for honor and decency, so it's actually kind of a goated change to make her think Aegon is both the best option, but also the actual legitimate heir. But then they just sort of ruin everything in this goofy ass scene where Rhaenyra Agent 47s herself into the Sept. I guess Alicent just kinda forgot her deep-seated hatred for Rhaenyra. When Alicent tried to fucking murder Rhaenyra in the middle of a crowded room in season 1, she had a good reason, at least in her mind. Here, she has been the wife and caretaker to Viserys, given him 3 sons, yes 3, I'm not even gonna get into that. And all of a sudden, Rhaenyra turns up to the funeral, her kids jump and blind one of her sons, and then in response to Alicent's desperate pleas for some kind of justice, the king gives his favorite daughter the same easy out to every situation she's ever had her whole life. But no, I guess Alicent kickstarted medieval World War III because of a misunderstanding. This doesn't even make sense, dog. Why would Alicent go to war over the last words of her drug-filled ancient husband who she doesn't even like? You're telling me she picked the Crypt Keeper over her queer-baiting partner? I hate this shit, man.
Once you take the throne, this senseless war must end.
So, just to be clear, Alicent going to Rhaenyra and offering up both her sons in exchange for safety is worse than Jaime saying he never cared about the people of King's Landing, innocent or otherwise. From this moment onwards, the show cannot claim to have a character named Alicent Hightower. It's just not her. She's just a completely different person than the character that George wrote. Alicent in the show is supposed to be symbolic of self-hatred. She's a woman who supported the patriarchy only to realize that it was never going to support her. And that's fine, I guess. Like, I really do mean that, but dang, is that just so much less interesting to me than everything else that the character is in the book.
Rhaenyra's heirs are none of yours. Your husband, even he has abandoned you. Gone these 6 long years to fight a desperate battle. Leaving the lady.
So you might have noticed that despite saying I liked season 1, a lot of the criticism I'm bringing up has its roots there. And yeah, the signs were always there. These folks saying season 2 fell off because it was only 8 episodes, or damn, that pesky writer's strike. No, stop. You motherfuckers was the same people who were making excuses back in season 5 of Game of Thrones with the whole Dornish plotline.
You want a good girl, but you need the bad pussy.
Game of Thrones didn't just get bad overnight, it got worse with each season until by season 8 it was unrecognizable. Spoiler warning for House of the Dragon season 3, 4, 5, however many seasons they stretch this shit out. They wrote out Nettles. Her and Daemon have an affair in the book that turns him into a better person and is a big reason why he essentially abandons Rhaenyra once she starts to go crazy. Also, I'm mad as hell that they erased the one canon black character in the entire story. Rhaenyra's neglect of the war and the people revolting against her is going to feel very out of place given how much they've shown she doesn't care about her sons dying and how much the common folk apparently love her despite her starving them. The green versus black debate isn't strong enough to support numerous black supporters defecting to the greens like they do in the book. The show focuses way too much on Alicent and Rhaenyra as the main characters of this story. It started with them, sure, but it doesn't end with them. Both characters take a backseat at many points in the story, and things are not properly set up to have us following Jason Lannister or Cregan Stark. Because the show portrays Rhaenyra as a feminist monarch and less of a spoiled rich kid, the ending of the show is probably going to feel quite hollow. She doesn't win the war, she dies brutally and at the hands of her brother, who also hasn't gotten much screen time and just kinda dies unceremoniously shortly after. Say it with me now. In the book, the end of the war is supposed to feel empty and unsatisfying because it's a war. You're supposed to wish it never happened and see the senselessness of it all. But the show wants us to cheer for Rhaenyra so much, I can't help but think fans will watch a depressed and traumatized Aegon III ascend the throne and think, is that really it? Who cares about the source material? Only lame nerds do the whole "it must be faithful to the book" thing. Well, first off, yes, lame nerd speaking. And second, clearly I'm not the only one, including George R. R. Martin himself. On George's blog, he took a break from talking about how much Winds of Winter isn't about to come out and went on a lengthy rant concerning House of the Dragon Season 2, and, well, its unfaithfulness to Fire and Blood. I ain't about to read all that, but I want to highlight a particular section. Maelor himself is not essential, but if losing him means we also lose Bitterbridge, Helena's suicide, and the riots, well, that's a considerable loss. And there are larger, more toxic butterflies to come if House of the Dragon goes ahead with some of the changes being contemplated for seasons 3 and 4. George is calling out that these changes create a butterfly effect. It's one small change, right? Well, no, because unlike what people keep trying to turn George's work into, his work is complex, with tons of characters, tons of intrigue, and a lot of moral ambiguity. The end result is that these already bad changes will balloon and create entirely worse changes. Just like what we saw happen from season 1 to season 2, or in Game of Thrones terms, from seasons 5 to 6 to 7 to 8. It didn't get bad overnight, and if you still disagree with me, if you like every change the writers made and honestly couldn't give less of a shit about what George's vision was, then let me ask you, why didn't the writers just get HBO to greenlight their own show? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because it wouldn't do nearly as well without the name recognition, the legacy that George R. R. Martin has established. I'm sorry, but tell me I don't have a point. To borrow a quote from one of my favorite YouTubers, if the source material is such a burden to your narrative, why even adapt it in the first place? Let's try to remember where the issues with Game of Thrones even started. That's right, even in the earlier seasons, boring plot lines, people acting out of character, cringy fucking dialogue.
A finger in the bum.
It all started when the writers decided, actually, I think my story is better. You know, despite the fact that the show earned its popularity in the first place by following the easily laid path already written for them. Game of Thrones was a show that once stood at the top of the world and is now spoken about like some 10-year-long bender we're all trying our best to forget about. It should be a cautionary tale for any writer, but instead, it seems like HBO, and of course, the team behind House of the Dragon, hasn't learned a single thing. Thank you for watching. God bless, and have a wonderful night.